What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Plus. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Dispatch yet again, and this time, the episodic structure of it. Now, when this game was coming out, I actually made videos on my main channel on Podcast Now, and I talked, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times, like, this was right. This was the right call, and I think was, like, arguing or wondering, like, I wonder if there was pushback. I feel like we kind of heard that throughout the release, even dating back to kind of interviews done around episodes 1 and 2. Like, I get episodic it's not the fashion, it's not what people do, and there probably would be pushback. And I think the quotes or the kind of talk around the studio was more like they didn't know if it was going to work, they didn't expect it to be this big, right? A lot of things like that. So okay, well, fast forward to now, game's a gigantic success that at least in part they do attribute to the game coming out episodically. Like, they talk about that being a key thing and it working, right? But I found this article on Eurogamer a couple days ago, and it kind of sums it up, right? Dispatch Studio was strongly advised against episodic release format, admitting that it's insane to do. So they talk about the studio exec noted that the team decided it wanted to go with a completely original narrative-driven episodic format. It was not simply about making life easy for them. And part of it was because we weren't really thinking about the feasibility. We were just thinking in terms of creative and player experience. Then they talk about everyone was telling us not to do it. We had internal debates about it, but the story was always structured that way. So while other release cadences were floated, such as bringing the game out in 2 halves or even 1 episode per week, the studio eventually settled on 2 episodes once a week. A lot of reasons for it we're now seeing the results of. There would have been a longer time period for it to be covered. The developer remarked that we would be seeing this kind of release schedule for TV shows, right, for decades now. We knew that it gives the train is leaving the station, but not just yet, I can still make it kind of feeling across weeks, and people catch on. When we look at concurrent user numbers across the drops, it's exactly that. It just kept doubling every week. Again, conventional wisdom says whatever you guys do in the first week, the second week is going to be half that number. It was literally the opposite. Those things we anticipated, I don't think we anticipated the scale of it. And then in terms of like other studios, they say it's insane to do from every metric. From a production perspective, no one should do this. But if you think episodic alone is going to be the thing that dictates success for you, then good luck. If the creative is strong, you can cut it up however you like, and probably is going to make it through, even if it's a poor decision. If we'd said we're just going to release the whole thing, it probably would have done okay, but it probably wouldn't have been as big as this. If you go episodic with a not-so-great story, you're flirting with people that aren't attracted to you whatsoever. And so honestly, I really want to take a look at that last part, because that was really beautifully said, and something that I think is almost, it's maybe even like a sensitive topic, because you don't want to, these developers, they're not telling other developers, other studios, these things to their faces, right? They play it nice, they play it very safe with each other, and that's fine. It's workplace banter, and they're all peers, I guess, with each other, even different studios. But, a more direct way of saying what that person said at the end there is, and I think it makes perfect sense, by the way. If you're going to do episodic, you need to have a reason for doing it episodically, and it needs to carry its own weight. So often, and we've seen this, right? We've seen, well, like, when did it work? Let's say that. When did it work? It worked when, of course, it was the fad. It was the fashion. But these things really could carry their own weight. I've always said, like, I look at Life is Strange. To me, Life is Strange was done, like, The Walking Dead, of course, you couldn't have done any of these things without Telltale's The Walking Dead, right? Season 1, whatever that was, 13 years ago. But, like, these games have never had the most consistent release. Even Life is Strange didn't. But I would say the buildup of Life is Strange, to me, felt the most organic, felt the most real, and felt like it was helping the game the most in real time until Dispatch. I think it's undeniable that Dispatch, you literally saw in the course of a month exactly what they said. The game doubled every week. You could tell new people were jumping on the bandwagon every freaking day. It worked, literally, it worked perfectly. It couldn't have worked any better than it actually did. So I would say, like, this is the new perfect way, right? This is your blueprint. But I would say, like, Life is Strange. See, like, The Wolf Among Us, a great game, right? That game had so many problems with, like, keeping a consistent release schedule, Tales from the Borderlands. But you look at some of the best episodic games, and it's not because they're episodic, it's because the episodes actually held themselves up. Like, I think to Life is Strange, you think to The Walking Dead, Season 1. I actually like all of them. I would say Season 2 was very, very strong on The Walking Dead. I would highly suggest replaying it if you don't remember. But, all those episodes, really as standalones, they are very strong. I think where it hurts is where episodes are filler, and did Dispatch really have any filler episodes? I will say episodes 3 and 4 were about building out the gameplay, the dispatching part of it, but they were very strong. They continued to push kind of what this game was. And I think episodes 1 and 2 were so strong. The ending of episode 4 was so strong. 5 and 6 were strong. Did they have weaker episodes than others? Yeah, it wasn't a consistent 10 out of 10 the entire way through, but they really could hold themselves up. Now, I will say, I think releasing them one episode per week would have actually been the wrong move, because I do think the 2 episodes balanced each other. The rough average was about 45 minutes an episode, right? It was only, I think the final episode, episode 8, was about maybe an hour 15, hour 20, right? But the rest of them were almost to the dot, 45 minutes long. So I do think you did need 2 at a time. Even you go back, Life is Strange, The Walking Dead, Tales, Wolf Among Us, Minecraft, Batman. These were not, for the most part, there were some that were shorter. Minecraft, I believe, actually was shorter. But for the most part, these are games that could take an hour to 2. Life is Strange, I think, actually was the longest. Some of those Life is Strange episodes can honestly take you 2.5 to 3 hours if you do everything imaginable. Some of the other ones, would take a little bit shorter, but they could still, they're an hour plus, right? You're not really giving people 34. And you know what? There's a recent example of this, and it's The Expanse. See, I did not really jive with The Expanse whatsoever, the game that came out, and also the sales, I think, were really, really bad. I don't really think it did well whatsoever. I remember one thing about The Expanse, though, is that the episodes were 30 minutes long. And that's to me, that's the number one thing that sticks out, is they just weren't long enough to ever make an impact on me, at least the earlier ones. But I do like that statement. If you're going to release episodically, you got to have a good story. You got to have the characters. So much worked with this game. And if the game wasn't as strong, of course, it wouldn't have done as well. It kind of needed all elements. It needed it to be episodic because it kind of needed that slow burn and the internet to kind of rally and the Invisigal and Blonde Blazer groups to rise. It needed that. And you couldn't have done that all in one go. I would actually argue that's a huge factor, right? Where the kind of pop culture side to Dispatch needed time to start to grow. And if you released it all at once, it wouldn't have grown. It would have come out. It would have surprised us all of how unbelievably good it was, but you would have experienced it all in one day. Everybody would have played it. And the length of kind of just separation and letting the thing kind of marinate. And also, by the time the game ended and everybody's so desperate, including myself, for a season 2, you're desperate for it in part because you lived with it for multiple weeks, not because you lived with it for one day, playing it. Yes, people did wait until the end. And that's true. People did wait until the end. Not everybody played it, literally week by week, but a lot of people did. A lot of people did. And I think way more than they thought. And also, again, you can't do that with every game. And a lot of episodic type games now could not get away with it. A lot of episodic games now, Life is Strange Double Exposure is technically chapter-based. Again, you look at The Expanse. There's a few, but there's very few. I mean, for the most part, it's a dead system, And I think this proves that it can work. And really, it can't. I mean, that's kind of where it stops. It can work. It actually can depend. You don't have to release them necessarily weekly, although weekly I think is probably the best. And I think you have to find the right time. You can't do 30 minutes, but they also can't be 4 hours every week. This system, the way they did it here, an hour and a half every week, you play 2 episodes, that's perfect, right? But they also have to be good. It just has to be a good game. I'm sorry. If it's a bad game, even if you do everything Dispatch did, 2 episodes per week, 4 weeks, it's concise, it's direct. You know exactly when the next 2 are coming out. But the game's just not good. You have to hold your attention from the 1 week to the next. You beat the game, you have 6 days left to kind of build up for the next 2 episodes. If your game's not good enough, it's not going to work. That's just how it is. So, I think that kind of gets in the way of people's judgment, where it's like, episodic, may, or does or doesn't. People would say does or doesn't work. I think it does. It's just you have to have a good game that also coincidentally is split up in episodes, right? It's not going to work if it's not like that. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.